to come up with some mental fuel for the Thanksgiving holiday here in the States and bringing that into our tabletop RPG games. And of course, we are not talking specifically about the holiday. We're talking about the things that led up to such a holiday happening, and maybe even some of the events that happened afterwards. So pre, current, and post Thanksgiving, harvest, the whole 9 yards. And we're talking holistically about this, just basically the idea of leaving the motivation for why you would want to leave your homeland, traveling to a new world, survival in that new world, making connections in that new world with hopefully many different cultures and factions in that new world, and um, the the survival of your old culture versus a new world where things can be quite a bit different, and the ramifications thereof. Okay, so today is Discord Tuesday. Discord Tuesday is kind of a grab bag, but I've been defaulting more towards coming up with game mechanical systems in for things. So let's talk about some gaming mechanics we could steal, take, modify, that kind of thing for our game, if this is the kind of game we want. So our main protagonist, if this is the direction we want to go, our main protagonist, the PCs and plenty of NPCs, hopefully, are on maybe sailing ships, sailing across the vast ocean that's never been done before, or they are traveling across deep space to colonize an alien world, or it's been discovered that there's a portal to another dimension, and the world you've lived in is dying, and the only way is a one-way trip through this portal, whatever the case may be. We're traveling there, and we want to embrace this idea of going into a new place and having relationships with new people and discovering new plants and animals and maybe weather systems, and the environment itself. Is this place known for earthquakes or storms or poisonous gases or strange gravity or strange shifts in time and space? Or maybe simply it is just a place where fruits and vegetables and the weather itself, whether it's snow or heat, humidity, torrential rains and things, or maybe just something different, or at least its intensity might be extremely different than where you've come from. And so I think one of the things we can do in this world is benefit the players, much like a survivalist, like say Dark Sun or Mad Max or something, that instead of granting treasure, superpowers, gifts of magic or something to the player characters, maybe the goal is survival, and by not acquiring enough things, that the dangers start to build up. So for example, and this could be done in a very metagame kind of way, if the player characters do not learn about the local vegetation, the local migrating animals, the marked territory by predators and such, maybe by them not gaining enough knowledge, they are causing their own dangers to increase. So an example would be, let's take like a pack animal like a wolf or coyote or some kind of like lupine or something, or even a lupine-like creature like a dingo or a hyena or jackal or something, right? And understanding how they mark their territories, understanding their how they hunt and such, has kept humanity alive. And if the PCs do not learn, and you can do this by points, you can do this by die rolls, success and failure with skill rolls and such over periods of time, maybe they create their own problems. Yeah. Oh, Pelora had to go there. Yeah, like, don't eat that yellow snow. And they're like, but it looks like lemonade. It looks so tasty. That's not a snow cone. You might not want to touch that. And you could absolutely, like, if you want to add a lot of detail, you could have yourself a couple of dozen types of plants, maybe another um, handful of dozens of types of dangerous animals that the players can learn about if you want to get into a lot of detail. The same goes for the same goes for I hear you, Omen. Like, yeah, yellow snow. Doesn't it taste like pee? And then someone else is like, how do you know what pee tastes like? So, um, yeah, but and as funny as that is, that's probably a truism at some point, right? Oh, that fruit looks really tasty and scrumptious, and it tastes like it tastes like perfection. It tastes like a dream, and everyone's like, you shouldn't have pulled that purple fruit from the tree because now you're going to start to hallucinate or get, I don't know, an alien thing's going to grow in your stomach and it'll be a chest burster and it's going to ruin dinner, and you don't want that to happen. And that could be a real thing, right? Just like the Alien franchise movies, they ended up on an alien world and starship and et cetera, encountered something they didn't know about, and it did. Uh, it's $20 extra if you want it weird. Yeah, and maybe these are the kind of things that are in this world that you know. Sure, we know what orcs are, but if they grow out of pods that hang from trees, and when the pods grow large enough, the membranes inside, you can see the little uh, alien fetusoids hanging from trees and such. That might be a thing, and so changing how we interact with the world would be pretty interesting, especially if it's extremely the more alien, the better. Although you could pull. If your group is really into real world survival techniques, being able to light fires, navigate, find clean water, or ways to purify water and such. Little self promotion, but we have a book called Survival that actually has real world survival techniques in it for use in Dungeons and Dragons. Just saying. Why is a dollar sign an S? I don't know. You're gonna have to add that that's a money of a different subject. Although we could do a whole world on just economics and finance itself, though, for tabletop games, which sounds like a good idea. So anyway, so along with having successes and failures in terms of survival and skill, I brought this up yesterday. I really like the idea of giving player characters responsibility, much like Pelora brought up yesterday about pelts and sending pelts back to the old world. We were talking. There's the triangle of economics that happened in our own world between the Caribbean islands, the newly founded states, and the Euro theater, and something like that could be happening in and around your setting, especially even if it's an alien world or a portal to another place, and resources are seemingly abundant in this new world, and the old world wants those resources and extracting those resources, and those resources could be anything. It could be mining, it could be mineral resources, from gold or gems. It could be animal resources like ivory, pelts, heck, meat, something in the glands, whatever the case might be. Maybe the eyeballs of the multi-stalked monsters that roam around this green skied and blue-grassed region are hallucinogenic and addictive, and so popping out those random eyeballs and those eye stalks might be really popular. Who knows? Whatever the case may be, it it pushes. There might be a great desire for the people from the old world and the old ways to extract these resources, and the PCs might be responsible for, extremely responsible um, for getting those things. Thank you, Dead Man. Dead Man says, if all you ever want to know about the dollar sign, and throws in the wiki into the into the Discord in Fantasy Grounds College. Yeah, and by the way, if you guys, for those who don't know, of course you can participate in the live chat on YouTube. You can participate over on Twitch because we simulcast there, and the audio pumps out into the basement in the boiler room over at Fantasy Grounds College in their Discord server. So the another thing could be that the player characters are intrinsically tied to the community that they are trying to help live and survive in this new world. So the player characters themselves, I could see as being like political leaders. Plus says, yeah, just read it. It's actually relevant to this sort of. Bring up those points. Bring up those points. Plur says it's the peso symbol. So there's a possibility of like, again, throwing off the shackles of the old way and coming up with a new system of government disseminating resources, applying the player characters having to decide who does what, when, and how. Is it more important to build shelter or to hunt for food? Is it more important to try to continue to hunt and gather, or to create a stable society where they're able to plant and grow foods and hope that they survive the strange the strange ecological system in this new place? Plur says, yeah, imagine an S with a P written over it. We'll get to that. Well, I think this, I'm not quite certain. There's a little bit of a squirreliness in there. There's also the idea that there is, not only should workloads be shifted around based on like, do you, I don't know, build a dam because of flooding? Do you move a community further inland because the PCs weren't sure about storm surge or something being on the coast of a vast ocean? Are there diseases or viruses, bacteria that is becoming rampant? Um, is there's this idea that the people are becoming restless because of what's going on? Maybe there's mysterious deaths in the local community as the population grows. Maybe there is maybe there's an investigation for theft, murder, embezzlement. There are spies in the group for um, rival survivalist conclaves that are there for their own particular reasons, and for some reason don't want to work with the PCs, or there are only so many resources to go around for, say, 50 people. Hey, Joe. Looks like, maybe there's enough resources for 50, but there are 200 people. Do you split up the 200 into smaller 50 person groups and hope that they all survive? Or does everybody work together? Is there a need to, are there people who desperately want to go back home and it's very difficult to go back home? And how do you kick those people out if they want to go? Are they becoming a problem by just being angry and talking out against the current leadership, i.e. the PCs who want to control the community? So the gathering of resources and however you want to measure those resources might be extremely important as well. Have we got enough food uh, for the winter? Are there safe trade routes between other small enclaves and communities? Have we established a great relationship with one or more of the factions of the native peoples who live in this world? Just how are we coloring the native peoples as savages, or are there many things we can learn from them? Do they just happen to be different? And in our real world experience, we consider like, oh well, they are more, how do I say this? They may present as being less technologically savvy, but doesn't necessarily mean that they have any lesser capabilities, right? As far as their ability to survive in this new world. Maybe a lot of the the technologies, whatever they are, that are brought over into this new world, maybe they don't work well, or they don't work as expected. Um, you bringing a steam engine over into this place, and then trying to find the coal to power the steam engine might be a little bit far more difficult when someone else is just like, listen, this is how you create a fire, and using their small brush in their hands, which might be far more efficient, an efficient method to start a fire. Um, Yeah, Polaris is South Africa setting. It was invasion. I saw you put that in there. Started with Cape Town being a stop-off point between Britain and India, and that may be a case as well. Like, what is the purpose of the settlement the PCs are protecting? Is it a stop-off point to transfer goods? Is it a safe? Is it like a walled city, like a safe haven, as military troops or religious organizations or explorers or diplomats are to go on deeper into the unknown? Who knows? And that might even change. For example, a religious enclave may have settled a particular rocky escarpment, and then the PCs arrive with, three ships of people who are there in this new world, and the religious organization is like, you guys can move somewhere else. And they're like, no, we land here. You have some resources. We are going to live here too. And there might be some there. You can always play up the tension when it comes to who's in control. Are the religious leaders in control? Are the PCs in control? Is the old government in control? Does someone try to create a newer government that hasn't been seen before? Especially when you have a nobility style of a monarchy, a patriarchy, a oligarchy, and then someone else is like, hey, let's do a representative government, and everyone looks at them and starts laughing, right? What how do you do that? And representative could be as simple as, hey, everybody, let's get together in the local largest building room we have and raise your hands if you think we should do X, Y, or Z. It's like, hey, should we put resources aside to build an aqueduct to get fresh water into our town? Raise your hand if you want to do that. Oh, yeah, yay. And then someone else is like, yeah, but if you take the labor to do that, we aren't putting people out in the fields for our new harvest. So what's more important, are the food we need, or this crazy idea of making a half pipe that's going to bring water to our community, and it's never been done before, and so on and so forth. Also, what skills are needed? Maybe people arrive that have very good skills in the old world. Let's say perfectly acceptable skills like, I don't know, accounting, being a lawyer, um, being a teacher, service industry skills that may or may not have any use in a brutal survivalist world. So, those lawyers and accountants might have to start getting their hands dirty, whereas the teacher is like, might be put to work and like, listen, you need to teach them how, cleanliness and maybe medical skills. You need to teach them about some history, about the flora and fauna, that kind of thing. And it sounds complicated. Yeah, people are like, woo, accounting. Uh-oh. Someone's got their fist in the air. Ooh, 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 ooh. Hey, listen. My job in delivering the post might not be very important in the beginning, but at some point, player characters might necessarily they might need to deliver messages and important missives to distant lands and communicate with these, kind of be the voices of varying communities, and have to go from cities, these smaller city states to city states. Thank you, Omen. It's like there are postmen and messengers all over Skyrim, and in this new world, there I could see communication might be very important, and communication might have to be different. There's all kinds of distant communications that people have come up with. The Australian um, native peoples that use bull roarers with the the twine and sticks that make a certain noise. There are people who use horns, um, smoke signals, birds, the Kenyan runners. I mean, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, no, I walk quite a bit on my route, but I do drive a truck to do it, so that saves a little bit of pressure off my legs. But I do quite a bit of walking, average of 10 to 12 miles a day, I guess. Um, yeah, Plur says the Pony Express thing is pretty neat when it comes to delivering over large distance. As a matter of fact, if I am correct, and I'm sure Dead Man of Tesla would put this out there, that the Pony Express was trying to hire orphans to be uh, to be horse riders, and the Pony Express, they actually would ride a horse to exhaustion. Not necessarily to death, but to exhaustion, switch horses, and then get a fresh horse and keep on riding. As a matter of fact, that's where in the States, the Pinkertons and the Wells Fargo and such to travel uh, monies across vast distances across the middle of the states. People had to protect those monies and messages and things, and so the Pinkertons and Wells Fargo were last names of people who protected the Pony Expresses and the stage coaches and things of that nature, and that's why those things were robbed. Much like piracy on land, robbing trains and things, which could be although a train system would mean that there's a pretty substantial society where the train's coming from, but why not? Maybe the player characters are involved in this newfangled rail system or travel system or something. Yeah, Joseph Keenan says the Inca had a huge message system like the Pony Express, but with runners. That's where I yes, absolutely, because there's a parallel in Africa. The Kenyan runners are notorious for being long distance runners and such, and they are dominant in a field in marathons because of such a thing, and which again, instead of your classic role playing like fighter, druid, monk, or something, you could have various professions or backgrounds. You could reskin them as, runner, messenger, carpenter, hunter could be a specific thing, um, trapper and trader, or whatever. You could have so many other um, reskin, reflavor some of the jobs that would come about because of this. Now, believe you me, there is a reason, and we're not going to get too deep into this because I don't want to. I don't want to go down too much of a deep dark path. But just as there's value in skin pelts and a value in harvests and a value in gathering anything from berries or salt or sugar cane and all this kind of stuff in this new world, whatever this new world system could be, there's a value in personnel. And that in itself brought about our you know n- newly formed slave trade, formed out of the old slave trade, indentured servitude and that kind of thing from the old world. And as the need exists to extract more resources, and without the technologies to extract those resources, it may be more important to get as much personnel as possible done the cheapest way. And it's possible for the player characters, like you guys know me, it's far easy to advance something 200 years and go, well, ultimately this is how it's going to turn out. But when you're in the middle of it, you have no idea what's going on. The player characters could literally be in the midst of the beginning of what might become the slave trade. Now, of course, or the beginnings of a slave trade. Now, of course, you don't need to copy and paste what has existed in our own world. It could be very much likely that people are brought over from the old world, and suddenly they are put in a position where eternal servitude, right? Yeah, you can go to this new world, but you're gonna owe us 100,000, gold crowns or something. And the people that live here are like, gold crowns? We don't need gold. We need someone who could pick up a shovel or like fire a bow or uh, you know track deer or some other kind. Like we don't gold. Gold coin is useless. We need barter. But those people may need to pay off their new world travel, and it might be impossible to earn 100,000 gold crowns in a world where gold crowns are completely useless, but they don't know that. And over time, the 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 fantasy of being free and the fantasy of the gold crown thing might just completely disappear. And the minute you get on the boat, like, yay, the family's going, we're leaving our old world because of the earthquakes and volcano and the diseases and the famine, and yay. And then they're just like, yeah, could you put these chains on? It'll keep you safe on the sailing on the ship across the ocean, and then never take them off. And thereby doing that in order to even engage in a slave trade indentured servitude system, you're going to have to, in many ways, you're going to have to edit out your humanity. And the best way to edit that out is to think of those people as less than human. And in a fantasy world, if they are of alien type or they are of a different species or something, that might be a very easy way. And if the player characters are in the beginning stages of that, what do they do? Is this something that is bigger than them and they're unable to stop it? Do they stand up to stop this thing while everyone else is screaming about the economics of the situation? Like, well, we really do need more personnel and we can't pay everybody, but we sure could use another 600 people to, tow these fields and carry the salt out of the mines and blah blah blah. We sure have these large fields of tobacco and cotton, and are you going to do it? Yeah, you're not the only person. And then things start to go on and on and on, right? Um, yeah. Oh, no, no, no. Joe, I am not saying that. I never mentioned Africa. I just mentioned uh, indentured personnel. So that kind of system has always existed. It just took on a new form when it got to the United States. But again, we're just using this as an as a like an overview, because Pelora says if you're going to invade a land with particularly fast distance runners, you're definitely going to bribe them to help you deliver messages. Would be an interesting interaction. And what do you pay them with? You know, um, Carrying a bunch of gold might be too heavy. But Joseph Keenan says the antebellum U.S. slavery wasn't the only form of slavery. Greeks, Roman, Bronze Age, Mesopotamian, Bible era, Aztec Asia, even in the somewhat modern age with the Russian serfs before the revolution. And in many ways, some people would say that it exists today in any number of forms. From, of course, there's sex trafficking. There is a form of slavery when people try to leave their old homes to cross borders into what they consider to be a safer place. There are people who are trying to in eclipse phase in the far future. Hey, I want to leave Earth and go off to this other world. Great. Okay. We're going to have to download your brain into a cortical stack and either create you're going to take a synthetic body, or we can grow you a biological body on your trip out. But listen, it's very expensive, so you're going to have to pay us back. And since you're effectively immortal, we're going to have you work this off for like 187 years by our calculation, but it's no time when you can live forever, right? Um, Yep, wage slave. Yep. Joseph Keenan says the Greek steam engine didn't catch on because you don't need labor saving devices when you have slaves, and that's where that comes from, right? What is the Once it's introduced, is the labor of 50 people worth it rather than spending the time, energy, and resources to create a device or magic or energy source or whatever the case may be to alleviate the need for having those people in the first place. And at a certain point, in all around the world, people made the case that don't fix what's not broken, basically. Joseph Keenan says, "Oh no, DBJ, I was just saying for other historical examples. Being American, they don't talk about other forms." Oh, you're absolutely right, and you can pull from that. And if what maybe the PCs began as wide-eyed, idealistic individuals to go to this new place, and then they start out at the bottom, i.e., the classic trope of starting out captured, imprisoned, and or enslaved, and then moving up from there. I think that'd be a great way to start, and to look around where the PCs are not only new to a world, but they're new to how the system works because they're not really sure. And then that created its own job, right? There were overseers, and overseers were the people who literally were hired to oversee the work that was done, and they were the enslavers, and that became its own cultural thing. I'm going to deviate from this because I didn't want us to go too far down this path, but whatever the case might be. Joseph Keenan says the eclipse phase slaves seems a lot like the illegal and immigrants nowadays. I absolutely agree with you, and there may be moving to a more egalitarian type of situation. There may be, for example, let's take our classic Dungeons and Dragons roles: rangers, clerics, fighters, wizards, druids, and such, right? Let's take them. Maybe, just maybe, those factions are like, listen, we'll pay your way to get here, but you owe your allegiance to us first. And if you're not for, how you guys know how relationships are. If you're not for us, you're against us, right? And if you're the kind of person who's like, I just want to help, but I don't, I'm not really feeling your religion, but if you're building aqueducts and feeding people, I'm down with that. And yeah, art and entertainment for trade, that was a thing too. People became entertainers because that's what you need, right? It's the all work no play doesn't really apply when you have a need for drink, a need to entertain yourself when the work is done. I think Alley Oop says the rabbit hole with punchy sticks covered with fecal matter. I think you're talking about. Uh, I think you're maybe talking about the idea of traps out there in the wilderness and such. Yeah, Omen brought up they have the career system like that in the Iron Claw game. I read up in the Iron Claw adventure books that passion plays were all the rage back in the day. Yeah, and also remember, a lot of entertainment was poking fun or making comments about what society was like. So it was oh yeah, Joseph Keenan says Ben Franklin ran away because he was indentured to his brother at a print shop. Yep. The idea of what is we do that now for the legal and medical profession, and there's other professions. Please, someone tell me what the reference is where you work for free to learn a trade. Um, and I know you guys know it, but it's on the tip of my tongue. But that may be a thing as well. So in order to get into this new world, to learn to ply your trade, it might be that you must learn the trade at a severe discount. Is it being indentured? Um, it's something like that. And they have different terminologies for what level you are when you learn under another person, um, especially in the medical and legal field, where apprentices, yeah, indentures, not necessarily indentured servitude, interns, yeah, apprentices, interns, I believe is what I'm thinking of. Yeah, yeah, where you, okay, how do I say this? You're not enslaved, but you have to do the work to live there. And this individual or faction, whether it's blacksmithing, whether it's being part of a group that hunts, or you're a group that mines, or whatever the case might be. You're part of a sailing group, or privateers, or traders, or whatever, and then they pay your way. Basically, they give you food, they give you board, and your job is to learn their trade before you're able to go off on your own. And then when you go off on your own, you pay them back um, bits of money, much like the old. If you guys remember this, long before there were rogues, there was a thieves guild, and you were known as a thief in Dungeons and Dragons. And when you ran your thieves guild, you paid a portion of your earnings to the guild. And so, as an apprentice, or an indenture, or an intern in these different factions, maybe the PCs are responsible for paying that off. And that's another way to gamify their abilities. Like, if you're a fighter, um, in this world, maybe you learned your fighting skills because of a mercenary group or something, and they look at you like, dude, you owe us, you owe us big time. Like, we gave you your first shield and armor, and we gave you your first crossbow and lance, or whatever the case might be. You owe us. And the player characters might be pulled in multiple directions. Also, when it comes to factions, as we all know, like I said before, if you're not for us, you're against us. And you could make up maybe a numerical system that, or you could even do a very simple system, for, neutral, or against, right? And when a PC garners the favor, they're for you, with one faction, maybe automatically there's another faction where you're against them. So, for example, you could have competing religious organizations, or the religious versus science, factions, or something like that. And if you're for the religious faction, whether you chose to or not, you're like, I don't really believe in what they believe in, but they're feeding the people, and they're bringing innocents in and giving them food and board. So yeah, I'm going to help them out. And then the techno faction, out there trying to build their steam engine, even though everyone's just like, we've got people that we don't pay that are in shackles. Why? I don't know why you're trying to make a steam engine. They might be like, oh, you're with those religious people. That kind of thing. Joseph Keenan says, the West Reserve here in Ohio, you got a few acres of land because of fighting in the Revolutionary War, homesteading in the Plain States, and lack of land to farm in the Old World. You know what? A reason to head to the New World. Yeah, I think sometimes we forget that, especially from their point of view, the the old world was a very difficult place to live, and when they found this new world, in their mind's eye, it was an infinite expanse of land. Infinite. You could never get to the horizon, was their point, right? And this idea, like the homesteading, where I'm going to go out as far as I can. I'm going to plant my flag, and this is my land. I'm going to, from horizon to horizon, I'm going to farm this land. I'm going to hunt on it. I'm going to raise my family. A bunch of us are going to raise our families. We're going to get together. And it was an open world, and you could just open up your arms, and people just ran out there like, you know, it was, big sky country. It was like God's country. It's like you could never, you, for the Europeans, I imagine at that time, from a land that could barely grow food, and the population centers were so large that you were always bumping up against your neighbors. You couldn't, there was no elbow room, and all of the nobles owned the land. You could never quite own it yourself. That was a big deal. And in your new setting, when your PCs and NPCs leave their old world, what happens to the new system, especially when the people who already live here are like, excuse me, knock, knock, knock. We don't own the land, and we're nomadic. So yeah, we're going to be coming through here. So you might not want to build your house here. Yeah. Yeah, Joseph goes on to say, oh, you have to manage your estate, homestead, or farm in addition to being an adventurer, which, you know, okay, PCs, plant your flag. Now what do you do? we're going to start building a house. Okay, how? Stone, wood, gather supplies. Who's going to do that? How do you feed yourself? And I don't mean to say that in terms of confounding the players to make it annoying, but they might have to put aside resources to do that. Clean water, efficient food sources, shelter, protecting yourself from the elements, predators, the interloping native peoples who come by and are like, yeah, I know you've been here for 8 months, but this is part of our migratory pathway. So what are we going to do with this? We've got, like, I don't know, a couple 100,000 bison we're following, and yeah, you're in the way. Which in and of itself might be a pretty interesting thing when the PCs are like, they're like, we've built 5 houses and we've got great shelter, and what the hell's about to happen? Yeah, Joseph says in Russia pre 1917 and after the revolution, Siberia was like that as well. It was like the Wild West. Russians tried to fill it for farming and industry resources. Yeah, exactly. And of course, there's what I love are the growing pains. You Because without drama there is no story. So you need the drama and the growing pains, while at the end of the equation we may know what happened, the people involved in it have zero idea what their life is going to be. Lots of people died on the way to success, and in their eyes this sucked. So, yeah. He goes on to say, have your family at your homestead. It provides an anchor to an area and the cliche of your family being in danger. And of course, you could always tie player character resources to your resource center, right? Hey, I need to get my spell slots back. Well, maybe it's not tied to a long or short rest. Maybe it's all tied to going back home to recoup, right? It's not a matter of earning gold. It's a matter of having those resources not only brought back to your home, but protected in your home. You can only carry so much food with you on a trip, but you can sure, have a grain silo and smoked meats and things like that done by the people back at your homestead, so that you can go back and get those supplies to travel out further. And he's like, sorry, DBJ, you bring out the history nerd in me. That's quite all right, dude. Uh, and those are plenty of things we can pull from. As a matter of fact, most of the spaghetti westerns that Western television and movies that were directed by Italian writers and directors and producers had a lot to do with spreading your wings out into the Wild West. And a lot of that was homesteading, creating a home where you wanted to live, um, in conflict with the people who were nomadic, who were moving around out there. The lack of a law. There were lots of people who were like, I could commit any crime I want. It's not like anybody's going to find out that I did it. And this old world sentiment of, yeah, I'm really glad you made your home here, but you owe us taxes. You owe us something because we allowed your life belongs to us because we allowed you to be able to move out here in the first place. And then, of course, there is the classic being pulled back to your old ways, right? The gunslinger, the fighter, the warrior who's put down the sword to toe the land, and now they've got to pick up their weapon again to fight against a greater evil, or an evil that's come out to find them. There's plenty of stories of people doing pretty horrendous things, and leaving their old life to have that life catch up to them. Gambling debts, the murder of nobles or innocents or something, the abandonment of your family, the theft of gold and riches to start your life ahead, the abandonment of your fellow soldiers on the field of battle to go to this new world. Those are the kind of things the breaking of tradition for religion because there were things you didn't like about how something was done, to go into this new world to say, hey, I don't like this idea and I don't want this to be a thing, and then having that reoccur over, to be brought back into the forefront. Also, if we want to gamify some of these things as well, you could, like when it comes to harvesting and hunting and things like that, you could have skill rolls or you could have points invested in something to establish the health of your character. So hit points might not just be a physical, like I get hit with hit points, I've got 37, I lose 5 of them, now I'm down to 32. It might be a measurement of your hit points might be intrinsically tied to your homestead. You know, maybe your homestead represents a certain percentage or a certain amount, or maybe it represents everything, and your hit points are brought down when damage, i.e., starvation, weather, those kind of things are done to the place where your home is supposed to be while you're out ranging around. In terms of hunting down the rabid, diseased wolves that are trying to kill your livestock or something, or the faction of nomadic raiders that are going out there taking advantage of the homesteaders, even though the indigenous peoples are like, oh no, they don't belong to us, but we don't like them either, and they're like, maybe they're cannibalistic or something. Plur says you can think about push and pull factors, things that push you from your homeland or things that pull you to the new land. It'll be different for each person. Not exactly like that, but I know you, Lord's being sarcastic. Like, I punch you in the face and your barn collapses. Yeah, the land and the king are one. I don't mean it like that, but what I mean is, much like Blades in the Dark, and Fate uses something called stress. So, it's a reskinning, a rewording of something. So instead of hit points, you have stress, and as you obtain more stress, you become less capable. So, for example, let's take this is going to be strange. Let's take Batman. Batman is a a playboy billionaire philanthropist that is an urban ninja that brings justice in the night in Gotham or something like that, right? And if he has 8 points in Rich Playboy and loses 8 points of Rich Playboy, the idea of that would be, if he loses that stat, that means his encounters as Batman are pulling the stresses of being Batman, means that he's losing his ability to be a billionaire playboy philanthropist. So my point would be, like, you're not taking that, and I know you're being sarcastic, Pelora, it's okay, but my point would be, if you have 15 points of homestead and you suffer damage while you're out there on the range, what's happening is your ties back to your home are starting to fray because you're out there doing other things. And so maybe that becomes a, like Omen says, I also heard that in Lord of the Rings they had morale instead of health. Yeah, your connections back home start to fray, and we've seen this done plenty of times, right? You're never home. You're not here to protect us, and of course, you have the argument. I'm out there trying to bring resources back home. You know, Pelora's like, what was the image? Batman on the homestead. Yeah, if Batman ever decides to become a farmer, yeah. I don't. So does that mean he's blazing trails through the harvest at, like, I don't know, 18 kilometers an hour? Alfred's over there like milking cows and stuff, like, oh, Master Bruce, yes. Catwoman, Alfred as his assistant, Catwoman as a horse thief. Yep. See, you guys already wrote the script, and I guarantee you that you could make that as an Elseworlds world story. I don't know why I brought up Batman. Whatever. But you get my point, right? You the players might be able to establish how many points they want to spend in their like morale or connections or stress or whatever the case you want to call it, and divide it up, and then each one becomes as important as the other one. And any if you completely lose it, it's not that you're air quotes dead, but you have no connections to this world any longer. It's just like, no, I'm just going to go off on my own. I'm an NPC now, you know. I'm See you guys. I I tried to build my life here and I'm gone. Joseph Keenan's like, you knocked up my daughter. I'm heading out west. See you later. I'm out. Yep. How many times have we seen that story? That that's a classic story that's happening now, probably every 18 seconds, which is unfortunate. But you get my point, right? Alley Oops is like, I see you milk the bull. You look like shit. Wow, no wonder the bull keeps coming back. I keep milking him, and I thought the cow just enjoyed it. I don't know. But yeah, or maybe someone it knocks him on the shoulder like that's not a bull, that's a minotaur, and he loves you. I mean, he loves you like a long time. What's going on? Yeah, peace and love to the family, my brother. Yeah, hey, what's going on there, man? Um, you're you're never late. We're just really early. Um, yeah, where are all the pretty female minotaurs? Yeah, we're talking this this week. We're talking nothing but yeah, bull cheese on toast. Mm. What's that on your chin? Saving it for extra. Um, no, we're this week we're talking Thanksgiving, and not specifically the holiday, but all the things that led up to it. And yeah, we even talked about the factors that led up to, and talked about the slave trade, indentured servitude, resource extraction, old world versus new world. You know, this whole week. Now today we're just talking about like kind of like gaming statistics, but yeah, tomorrow's world building, we can talk about what kind of world we want to do. Yeah. Joe's like, time to move east 2 blocks. Work calls. Hey man, hey Joe, have fun, man. I always appreciate your outlook, and I'm glad I could spark some of that history in you. While you're at work, I don't know, daydream about that stuff. Bring it on back tomorrow, if you can. Um, yeah, just the whole idea of what Thanksgiving brought about, both the good and the bad, and much of, like I brought up Monday, where we were talking about, like I said, very generally, the idea of Thanksgiving is the people from a different world come to a new place. They meet native peoples. They learn skills to survive because they need to flee or leave their old world, and it is a giving of thanks for a successful harvest, and that represents the surviving in a new world. But who the hell is going to say, who measures what success is in a new world? The people who already live here. When I say here, in this, as if it's, you get my point. The indigenous peoples who Joseph's like, sneaky, I'm listening in the car. That's all right, that's cool. The people who live here already are going to be scratching their heads while all the fits and the trials and tribulations are going on with the new people. They're sitting in the back leaning on their well-built spears and their domesticated riding mounts and stuff, and scratching their heads like they're like children. Like, what the hell? And when more and more of these people, because remember, we can flip the script on this, and the PCs, the protagonists, could be the people who are native, and you have these new interlopers coming in. How do you handle that, especially if there are more people coming in than you can handle? You know, uh, uh, um, a ragtag group of 20 or 30, it might not be a big deal. when you start having thousands show up on your shores and there's no way to stop it, you're like, oh my God, oh, there, you know, uh, uh, 5 ships show up and they're a religious organization, and then 4 more ships show up and they're a military group, and then 3 ships show up and they're nothing but hunters and trappers, and you're just sitting back like, seriously? And sure, the player characters could play like classic elves, and I don't mean Dungeons and Dragons elves. I'm talking about like fey spirits or something, or they could play people that are literally one with nature in the fullest regard. Shapeshifters, people who can who can call upon the elements, people who are intrinsically tied to the elemental powers and call upon the the pagan gods, or what they consider to be pagan gods, but for you, they're elemental spirits that can call down lightning and stuff like that. But what if their numbers just keep growing? Do you make peace with them? Do you embrace them? Are there some that you're like, you know what, some of these people are good, some are bad? How do you kick them off? And if you start kicking them off your land, what if they go from being inquisitive to being aggressive, especially if they have something that you didn't know about, which is called technology, such as like firearms and explosives, and they bring with them diseases and stuff. Yeah. Polaris is building on a homestead could give you a better reputation, if nothing else, for a quote, you don't have enough goodie points to buy this, or just discounts and so on. Yeah, I'm with you on that too. Like, the power of your homestead, like, could be your reputation within the community. Oh, they run the farm up north. Okay, you're like you said, cheaper discounts, or you get, what's another way? You it could be the equivalent of building a stronghold, but not on the level of a stronghold. So you have people who are producing milk and cheeses and farming for food and making supplies that the player characters may need, or maybe other people need, so you can trade for the things that you need as an adventurer, simply because you're protecting your homestead, which is exactly what I'm talking about. So a 6-point homestead might give you 6 points of like tradable assets, as an example. But you might have to spend some of those 6 resources, like, oh man, I need to spend 3 of them to defend my homestead, so I only have 3 tradable resources. The other 3 can hold off what would be the equivalent of 3-point enemies or disasters or something. Like, disease might be a 2-point disaster. Hurricane winds might be a 1-point disaster. Fallow fields and flooding might be a 3-point disaster. Like, you could do something like that. Malika says, oh, you mean like raping, pillaging, culture vultures? I like culture vultures. I like that. Racism and genocide, the building blocks of any great community and society. Yay! Happy genocide to you too. Yeah, I'm out. Peace. Yeah. Um, but of course, there's a, yeah, almost like, define culture vulture. Oh, I'll get into that. Joseph Keenan says blacksmith, crafting, enchantments at the homestead. Yeah, I'm thinking of all that. Culture vulture is the idea of in, taking things from another culture without the context of what it is that culture represents. So an example would be, I'm trying to think of a real world example of culture vulturing in terms of okay. um, the United States used to be filled with millions upon millions of free range bison, buffalo, and the native peoples would follow the herds and they would feed off of them, and they'd kill 1 or 2, and they use their skin and their pelts and the whole 9 yards. They used the whole animal, but they wouldn't kill them all off. And then the new people arrived and they go, oh wow, that's a lot of bison. That's a lot of meat and skins and pelts. You know what we could do? if we kill 10,000 of them, isn't that better than just killing like one or two? And so culture vulturing is basically taking something from someone else's culture and then just and not using the rest of it. Some would have said that mixed martial arts is kind of like that, by stealing the martial of martial arts, but not keeping the art of the martial art. Um, oh, that's how you punch and kick and break limbs? Sure. Oh, I'll learn that. And then the person's like, yeah, but there's also spirituality behind that. And they're like, yeah, yeah, whatever. um, yeah, Pelora brings up Numenera has a bunch of rules for communities, a whole bunch. I would definitely steal that. Yeah, yeah. I'm not. There are still people who don't like the idea of MMA. Yeah, yeah. Omen's like, but MMA isn't so bad as long as it's not against the rules, of the game anyway. Yeah, yeah. The idea is that is don't get to the end of the equation. So anyway, guys, listen, gotta go. I have to drop off the car. Leaving out with the wife. Guys, I will see thee tomorrow. Everyone have a great day. I'm glad you could spend time with me. I know your time is very valuable. I hope you're able to leave with a little bit of change. Everyone have a great one. See ya.